If we look at Asia-US, we have seen some indications of improvement when it comes to dynamic load factor capacity and also rates. We've got the Asia-Pacific to North America, and we've seen some decreases.
What we've been seeing is that the typical recovery after Chinese New Year has been slower than usual, especially compared to last year. COVID rates are skyrocketing in Hong Kong. There are issues getting trucks from China mainland into Hong Kong, which will impact the amount of air freight demand out of Hong Kong. So it's still very difficult. Yeah, as we mentioned in earlier sessions, air freight capacity is just one piece of the puzzle, but also the ground operation and staff is a key component, and that is still an issue in that part of the world.
So I've got the rates up here now, seeing the rates around about $12 a kilo. Any comments on that when it comes relative to what you're seeing on the capacity and dynamic load factor?
Rates tend to fall during Chinese New Year. Despite that carriers are pulling back capacity, there still tends to be a surplus of capacity relative to demand in that time frame, but you do not see it go up again. It's been continuing trending downwards for the last couple of weeks. So it's in line with what we've been hearing, that the market has been relatively soft.
Some customers are obviously locking in longer contracts at that higher rate, but relative to what we're seeing in the market when it comes to capacity and dynamic load factor, but a little bit of a sign that things have improved since the last 4 or 5 weeks, but still a long way to go, right?
With all the uncertainties.
Well, based on that, I want to flip over to China, Europe. So as we look into the China-Europe discussion, what countries are you seeing impacted when it comes to capacity?
The impact of the crisis in the Ukraine, with Russian airlines not being allowed to fly into European space, and as a result of that, European airlines not being allowed to fly in the Russian space, creating all sorts of havoc on the Europe to Northeast Asia and back. So the main countries or the main lanes affected by this are China, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan. And that's where we see it. When we look at the data from last week, we've seen capacity drop by a bit more than 20% from Northeast Asia into Europe. We've seen the load factor go up to 84%, which when a seller's market drives up prices, and we've seen the short-term rates increase by 5 to 10% just in 1 week. But it's not the whole of Asia. Markets like Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, they're far less affected because of the way the airlines are flying or operating into those markets.
Japan Airlines, they pulled their flights for 1 or 2 weeks for rescheduling, and there was a couple of other carriers that also had reviewed their schedules and cancelled some capacity. We've got Airbridge, European operation, being more or less shut down, so to speak. So that alone on those trades has had a massive impact. Any comments on that?
Well, I think you summed it up very nicely. A massive impact. Because there's already so much tension on the global air cargo supply chain, it just needs a little incident to turn things sour very quickly. And this is not a little incident. This is a major crisis having a profound impact on air freight. Getting 20% less capacity will have an impact on load factors, will have an impact on rates. How long that will continue, that's a big question. There will be creative solutions developed by airlines, but it's very complicated. Fuel is, of course, a major consideration. I read this morning that it was recently at a 14-year high, so that there's all sorts of logistical cost implications.
Have you heard anything about what the airlines are doing with the freight forwarders?
Not in particular, but this is the time of year, typically, but what is typically in this day and age with all the stuff around us. But typically this is the time, by the end of March, that the airlines and the forwarders would agree on their allocations, and they do it again in October. So I would be slightly surprised if airlines would be tweaking existing allocations.
It just goes to show how fragile the air cargo industry is and supply chains, right? How that kind of ripples effects into the rest of the industry.